morning and welcome to the Tuesday, October 11th version of the Lane County Board of Commissioners regular meeting. Welcome to Harris Hall. We have a good agenda today, and we'll start right with the top of the agenda. Mr. Mokrahewski, do we have any adjustments to this agenda?
No.
Then
we do have, one item on consent.
I'll ask board for that one. I will mention also that Commissioner Bozovich is excused absent this morning. So from the board, any adjustments to the agenda? Vice Chair Trieger.
Thank you, Chair. We were informed earlier that item A5 on our consent calendar is pulled. So that will not be on our consent calendar. In 5A5.
A5, and that's pulled, not to be worked on separately, but pulled completely.
Pulled completely at this time. Yeah.
All right, Ms. Mokrahewski, you have that, and then we'll move down the agenda to any emergency business.
We don't have any emergency business.
We have none. To the board, I see none. Then we'll move directly into public comments. Thanks for being here for public comment this morning. We'll be entertaining comments from people live in Harris Hall and from people online. We'll accept comments from people in Harris Hall first, followed by the people online, after which I'll ask anybody else in Harris Hall if they wish to address the Board of County Commissioners. You'll have 3 minutes to speak, and if you would, keep an eye on that clock right there, because there will not be a warning when it ticks down within 10 seconds. At 3 minutes, I'll ask you to complete your statement, and we'll move along to the next person on the sign-up sheet. Now, for those people who are online, what will happen at 3 minutes is that your mic will be silenced, and we'll move along to the next person on the agenda. So we'll have 3 minutes to talk. When I call your name, please step up to this microphone right here if you're in Harris Hall. State your name, and you'll have 3 minutes to speak once you have stated your name. So today, first on the public comment sign-up sheet, is Jim Schaefer, followed by Stacy Holt, excuse me.
Good morning, commissioners. I'm here for election integrity, or maybe the greater part is integrity, period. I've been down here many times, and I was a little bit shocked. First thing I want to introduce here is I walked into your commissioner's foyer, for lack of better terms. It's a commissioner room upstairs where you have a clerk there most of the time, take papers and whatnot. I was kind of shocked to find pronouns. I don't think pronouns have a bit of business doing in elected government position. That's a personal choice by the people of the community, how they want to behave, how they want to do. I don't think it should be enforced. I don't think it should be part of. Another reason I bring this up for integrity is because I've spent a great amount of time trying to work with this organization known as Lane County through the elections, through you, done numerous things. So I want to bring to your attention, I had this as a handout. So they asked if I had a handout, and I said I do. So I was going to pass this around to you. Possibly you don't know about it, but it is up there in your foyer. It's in a little canister where public people come in there and pick it up. And I just find it basically very offensive. Anyhow, moving on to my integrity issues with you. So we asked for some particular records out of your election apparatus here in Eugene. And your legal counsel, the county clerk, even a paralegal was involved in this thing, and your own selves, because this escalated over a period of 10 days where the county clerk initially says, we don't create records we can't create. The emails went back and forth, and they did create a record. They gave me one file, so they knew how to create it. The machine does create it, but here's the catch, people. Lane County has broken a federal and a Oregon state statute law. You're supposed to keep these records for 22 months. Your part in this is we sent you a letter asking for a resolution to the problem. We sent that on October 3rd. So the expiration on this would have been, maybe I got the wrong one. The wrong one. We sent it to you on September 12th. Expiration on that was 10 days later, business days. You have gave us zero response. And to me, it's all about having a comfort with who we have elected people. We're supposed to have a kind of an inner trust, if you will. We ask you for information, you give it. We interact with you. We've been trying to work with you for nearly 2 years. It's almost on the anniversary of 2 years. So we just want to serve you notice that we're very distraught with the whole situation, the way it's played out. And in closing, Lane County was also cited by a judicial watch. They were cited because of record keeping. And again, we've included this. We introduced that to you in January. Zero response. So, thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Sheffer. Stacy Holt, followed by John Large.
Pronouncing on that is Schaefer.
Thank you, Mr. Schaefer. Stacy Holt will be followed by John Large. Hi.
Morning. My name is Stacy Holt, and I'm also here with the election integrity team from Wayne County Republicans. Did you know that there are nearly 18,000 more people on the Lane County voter rolls than there are adults in Lane County? I'm part of a team that has been looking into why this is for nearly 2 years now. And what we have discovered is that Lane County has dirty voter rolls. Section 8 of the National Voter Registration Act requires states to implement procedures to maintain current voter registration lists. Or as Chapter 247 states, among other things, counties should perform routine voter file maintenance throughout the year. To date, we've filed hundreds of affidavits from canvassing efforts that have revealed a shocking number of people registered to vote at addresses they are not actually at. Here's a stat from one of our canvassing efforts. For example, of 511 registered voters canvassed at 40 locations, yes, 500 registered voters at 40 locations, 307 or 60% of those registrants did not live at the address on file, as confirmed by residents that do live there. I am disheartened by the lack of attention our filings have received by our county clerk and by your body. A specific example, in July and November of 21, we filed affidavits showing that 187 registered voters, both active and inactive, do not live at the addresses they're registered at. 7 months later, as of June 2022, 177 of those challenge registrants still remain on our voter rolls. 57 of those are active. I suspect when we check again soon, the story will be much the same. Our team has continued to canvass and file affidavits in our efforts to clean up Lane County voter rolls and have every intention of doing so until we are satisfied that our voter rolls are clean and accurate. Voters depend on this. To voters, dirty voter rolls can mean dirty elections, and that is not the image we think Lane County wants or deserves. Therefore, I'm asking you today to compel the county clerk to expedite the process of getting our challenge registrants corrected or removed from our rolls, and to continue to work with us diligently to clean up Lane County voter rolls going forward. And I want to say, since I have a little bit of time left, that I'm on social media a lot. And one of the biggest challenges that we have right now getting the vote out is people trusting elections. And I really feel like that is our purpose. We're not out there trying to find fraud. We're trying to give confidence back to our voting base again. And this has been a very big challenge for us. And so I'm asking Lane County commissioners to lead the way in Oregon and help us help our voters trust and have confidence in our elections again. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Holt. Please, no signs of outward signs of appreciation or disappreciation. Thank you. John Large is the last person signed up in Harris Hall. John Large.
I'm John Large. I'm the chair of the Lane County Republican Party, and I've gotten in on most everything that the election integrity has done. I know that you commissioners have gotten all the paperwork that we have completed with no comments. As of this point here, I'm really disgusted with the commissioners, because you sit there like nothing's going on. Our voter rolls here in Lane County are terrible. We just ran another spreadsheet on all the voters that did not vote in the primary election in Lane County. 1,750 did not vote in the primary election. And of the 17,500, 600 weren't even in the state. They haven't been corrected, and it has been 2 federal elections that have passed that nothing has been done to our voter rolls. Lane County Elections office has done nothing to repair it. Now we're in the cast vote record that we've asked for, which is federal law and state law. And Lane County does not have them. They have no custodian of them and they don't have them. You've broken the law. We'll proceed on from there.
Thank you, Mr. Large. Mr. Large is the last person who signed up in Harris Hall. Excuse me, after the online testimony, I will ask if anyone else, excuse me, wishes to speak. Ms. Jones, will you conduct the online testimony, please?
Yes, thank you, Chair Farr. At this time, if you have registered to attend the virtual public comment session, please raise your hand if you wish to be heard during this time, and I will call upon you in the order the hands are raised. I do see one hand raised right now. I will call on David Eigel. David, I will unmute your microphone and you may begin your public comment. David, I show yourself muted. There you go. David, you may begin your public comment.
Oh.
There you go. Oh, you just mute. There you go.
Ms. Jones, will you start from 3 minutes, please? There you go. Thank you.
Yeah. David, yourself muted again. There you go. Okay, now you're unmuted. David, I show you're unmuted, but we cannot hear you or if you're speaking. Not sure what's going on with your connection. I'm going to see if anyone else has public comment right now. I do see 6 people are signed up, but I do not see any additional hands raised. If you did register to speak at public comment, please raise your hand and I'll call upon you.
Hello, you can't hear me?
Now we can hear you. I'm going to restart your timer.
All right, I'll be brief.
There you go.
Yes,
I am unable to hear Mr. Eigel. Can anyone else hear him?
No.
Mr. Eigel, I'm not sure if you're in a zone where you're dropping connection or something, but we're unable to hear your comment consistently. Chair Farr, I will defer to you how you'd like to proceed. Mr. Eigel is the only hand I have raised. Would you like me to
Let me
continue
check,
to?
I'll see if anybody else wishes to provide testimony, and then we'll give Mr. Eigel one more opportunity. And Mr. Eigel, if you can hear me, you can also submit your comments directly in writing, which I do have written comment from you already. So at this point, I'll turn back to Harris Hall. Anyone in Harris Hall wishes to spend 3 minutes talking to the Board of County Commissioners? Ms. Jones, nobody else? Do you want to give Mr. Eigel one more try?
Yes, Mr. Eigel, we're resetting the timer one more time, and I do show that you are unmuted. So if you can give us a test, can you hear us? Mr. Eigel, we're not hearing you, so at this time I'm going to return the meeting to Chair Farr. I apologize for the inconveniences, Mr. Eigel. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Jones. We'll go back to our live meeting. Now we have the Commissioner's response to public comments on and/or other issues and remonstrances. I'll turn to the board. Well, if no one else is going to talk, then I will. That usually has a hand raised. Okay. I'd like to thank you all for testifying this morning, and we'll have a couple of questions from Ms. Mokrahysky that I'll direct to you regarding some of the comments that were made regarding response to the public requests. With that, I'll once again, I do this every Tuesday. If you turn around and look out of the back window, you'll see one of the coolest things in Lane County. That is Lane County Farmers Market. It operates in what used to be our Butterfly parking lot. It's soon to be year-round farmers market, providing farmers in Lane County an opportunity to sell their product right downtown Eugene. Anything else from the board? Seeing nothing else, we will move down the agenda. We have before us the consent calendar for October 11th, 2022. Do I have a motion?
Chair, I'll move approval of the consent calendar minus item A5 for Tuesday, October 11th, 2022.
Second.
Moved by Vice Chair Trigger and seconded by Commissioner Burney. We have today's consent calendar. I'll mention to those people who are watching online or who may be here, if you click on view material on our online package, you'll see all of the material that was considered by the Board of Commissioners before placing these items on the consent calendar. This will be passed by a single motion and a single vote. With no further discussion, all those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Passes 4-0 with Commissioner Bozovich excused absent. Then we'll move along to item 6 is an introduction of from El Rapa. And Commissioner Burney, I'm going to turn this over to you. You'd asked for, you are our representative of the Lane Regional Air Pollution Authority Board, and turn it over to you for the introductions.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Steve. This is going to be a convoluted introduction, and I apologize beforehand. Obviously, El Rapa, the Lane Regional Air Pollution Authority. I've been on that board for 4 years. It's chaired by Joe Pictionary, Springfield City Councilor. It's been a delight to work with him, and many other elected officials are on that board, and Steve will talk to you about that. But I think it's sort of poignant that we have this presentation. This body supports El Rapa. We have not had a presentation from El Rapa in the 4 years that I've been on this body. And so we felt it was high time. The coincidence of that with the air quality or lack thereof that we've been experiencing from the Cedar Creek fire is somewhat interesting. And I want to take this opportunity. In 2020, I believe it was 2020, Commissioner Buck, when you were chair, we didn't anticipate a variety of things that occurred. We didn't anticipate the January 6th insurrection. We didn't anticipate the killing of George Floyd and all of the things that occurred after that. And we didn't anticipate the historic fires that occurred that year when Commissioner Buck was chair. The lion's share, virtually all of those fires have occurred in her district. And so about a month ago, when I mentioned that Lane County commissioners didn't do the work, I was talking about the work of we don't fight fires, we don't manage fire control, we don't, as commissioners, deliver healthcare services, we don't provide drug counseling, we don't build houses, but the way I said it was absolutely inappropriate, because I said we didn't do that work, and we do work. And I said it after Commissioner Buck had discussed all the work she's been doing to align resources and provide federal and state resources and support and be at all of these fires. And I don't know, sometimes you have to drive an hour and a half just to get from one end of where you represent to the other. So Commissioner Buck, I hope you'll accept the apology in terms of the words that I used to make that statement. And I no way meant to infer that you weren't working your butt off. So thank you very much, Commissioner. And in that regard, another gentleman who's working very hard is Mr. Dietrich. Steve Dietrich is the new as of about a year or so ago, Executive Director of El Rapa, and he's done just a sterling job. And Steve, if you would give the body an introduction to yourself and a sense of where El Rapa is going. Thank you, sir. And thank you, Chair, for allowing me to make those remarks.
No problem, Commissioner.
Chair Farr, members of the commission, thank you, Commissioner Burney, for that warm welcome. And I have a short presentation that I'm going to give, but before I was just going to say and add more to the information that Commissioner Burney's already supplied. But I come from a long line of working in state government, in consulting, and also in industry. I have 36 years of environmental experience, as well as over 20 years of that time spent in air quality. I hail originally from Virginia. I'm a native of Virginia, and then I moved to Wyoming and now Oregon. And in each of those stops, I worked in state government, in industry, as well as consulting. So I'm here to share with you what El Rapa is all about, some of the work you're probably familiar with, as well as some of the challenges ahead and some of the improvements that I think we need to work on together. So with that, I'll start with, and Diana's going to advance the slides for me. So if you can go to the next slide, Diana. Thank you. So ARAPA is responsible for implementing the Federal Clean Air Act in Lane County. By way of review a little bit, the Clean Air Act was signed into law in 1970 with amendments to the Clean Air Act both in 1977 and 1990. Federal authority is passed to the state, which in Oregon is held by the Oregon Department of Environmental Quality. When it comes to the Clean Air Act, air regulations must be at least as stringent as the authority is delegated from the national to local level. Meaning ARAPA cannot be any less strict in regulations than DEQ, and DEQ cannot be any less strict than EPA's rules. In addition, Oregon Department of Environmental Quality can and has added additional regulations statewide. An example of that is the Cleaner Air Oregon program, which is roughly about 4 years old now. It's a more stringent state regulation. And ARAPA administers state air programs like the Cleaner Air Oregon program in Lane County as well. ARAPA has been delegated state and federal authority to monitor and regulate to protect air quality in Lane County. ARAPA is the only local air pollution control authority in Oregon. 5 regional partners founded ARAPA in 1968 to do this important work locally, allowing complex rules and regulations to be implemented by an entity familiar with the area, with the community, and with the businesses. ARAPA's rules and regulations closely align with that of the state. Next slide. As I said earlier, we implement local, state, and federal rules and regulations in Lane County, which is our core responsibility. But ARAPA monitors air quality, both the national ambient air quality standards and toxics, and implements strategies and programs to protect and improve air quality. We're proud of the ambient monitoring network, and it is more extensive than what DEQ could possibly administer themselves. ARAPA protects air quality by issuing air permits to businesses who emit pollution above de minimis levels. ARAPA assures compliance with these permits both through announced and unannounced compliance inspections at these facilities, through source testing, complaint investigations, and on-site facility emissions monitoring and reporting that we review. Our agency strives to provide good, accurate, and timely information to the public and our partners on air-related issues, such as the Air Quality Index that's on our website every day. And finally, ARAPA enforces our rules in Lane County to encourage and emphasize the importance of compliance with our air regulations, which levels the playing field in industry, and everyone benefits from that. Next slide, please. So in this slide and next slide, I'm gonna go a little bit more into the services that ARAPA provides. ARAPA's complaint intake, response, and detailed investigations into air quality. Complaints is a service provided to many Oregonians outside of Lane County, but not to the level of detail that ARAPA can provide. We respond to about 95% of all complaints submitted. Outdoor burning or backyard burning is an important tool for rural landowners to manage overgrown vegetation. ARAPA helps manage the outdoor burning season to best assure smoke is not negatively impacting others unnecessarily. And then fees collected from civil penalties are annually forwarded to Lane County General Fund. This amount varies from year to year, but it usually ranges from $20,000 to $50,000 a year. Next slide. More with the services that we provide. Stationary, commercial, and industrial businesses in Lane County who emit air pollution above a certain threshold are required to receive an air permit from ARAPA. Our local permitting program is more detailed and timely than you might see elsewhere. Our ambient monitoring network is more extensive in Lane County because of ARAPA. And in case you didn't know, we have 8 ambient monitoring sites across Lane County. For example, our agency has leveraged a second air toxics monitor, of which there are only 9 in the whole state of Oregon that would otherwise exist. So we have 2 air toxics monitors in Lane County, which normally would only be able to have 1. ARAPA has also installed around 109 purple air sensors, which you're probably familiar with, that we provide in Lane County. which provides a greater density of particulate monitoring, data information, which is helpful, especially during wildfire season that we're experiencing right now, when smoke intrusions can rapidly degrade air quality. And then ARAPA ensures Lane County is meeting the National Ambient Air Quality Standards for all 6 criteria pollutants that EPA sets standards for, and including in the Oak Ridge, Westford area. Next slide. So one area in Lane County that has been a challenge for us in air quality has been Oak Ridge. Over the years, ARAPA has worked closely with the city of Oak Ridge and nonprofits in the community to implement programs to improve air quality in Oak Ridge. The graph on this slide on the left illustrates the PM 2.5 monitors of the 5 monitoring locations that ARAPA has, including Oak Ridge, to below the National Ambient Air Quality Standards limit. And that's represented by the horizontal red line. The result is ARAPA successfully requested the EPA designate Oak Ridge Westford airshed from a non-attainment rather, of the federal standards to attainment for the PM standard, both for PM 2.5 and PM 10. The timeline for this process to attainment spanned many years since EPA designated the area as non-attainment back in 2009. This redesignation in status took effect last month in September. This was a great accomplishment by ARAPA and the local partners of Oak Ridge because it took many years to accomplish. Next slide. In the last few years, wildfires have become a greater presence on Oregon's landscape. ARAPA is closely involved with state and federal agencies such as the Oregon Department of Environmental Quality, Lane County Public Health, Oregon Health Authority, and many others, including the U.S. Forest Service and the National Weather Service, to forecast smoke movement and impacts. ARAPA can and does issue air quality advisories, which we've recently done in Lane County to inform the public when air quality will reach unhealthy levels. Next slide. So thinking much into the future, much of the work done in Oak Ridge to improve air quality would not have been possible without the funding from the EPA in the form of a targeted airshed grant, or TAG. ARAPA has been able to secure 2 tags, the first in 2019 for $4.9 million, and the second in 2021 for $2.7 million, for a grand total of $7.6 million. Looking forward, ARAPA is preparing to maximize the agency's ability to bring federal dollars to the county. We're in the process of hiring a finance grant analyst to help pursue air-related grants from grants such as the American Rescue Plan, the Inflation Reduction Act, and then grants related to environmental justice and communities overburdened by pollution, especially air pollution. We also want to look for ways to calibrate with our partners, like Lane County, to seek out and apply for additional grant funding. ARAPA's service to Lane County businesses remain a key focus with our agency activities. We strive to issue environmentally protective air permits that conform to existing rules and regulations. Our local efforts allow ARAPA to pass a greater amount of facilities through the Cleaner Air Oregon program. Cleaner Air Oregon is relatively new, like I mentioned earlier, it's a state toxics program. And it regulates based on potential health risk, which is a new way of doing business in air quality. The sharing of that information related to industry in Lane County is expanded to the agency's ability to tailor outreach and messaging to the needs of the community in Lane County. Next slide. So in order to increase funding opportunities, ARAPA is working to improve connections and relationships to our partners. Lane County is one of those partners. The first annual partner meeting took place in August. This meeting reviewed the Intergovernmental Agreement, or IGA, that founded ARAPA. It provided information on the ARAPA's financial structure and the importance of maintenance of effort in our ability to accomplish the work in Lane County that we are tasked with doing. The meeting also detailed ongoing grant efforts, public affairs initiatives, operational successes, and other support services provided by ARAPA. Those who joined us for the inaugural partner meeting are shown at the bottom of this slide, and all of the partners are represented that day. We look forward to seeing representatives from each partners in next year's meetings, as well as having LRAPA attend meetings like this or any other meeting that would be beneficial to our partners. Next slide. And lastly, and more recently, we upgraded our website. It went live on September 15th. This upgrade was in response a lot because of the feedback that was provided to us by Lane County residents wishing to have a more intuitive website that provides direct access to important information presented in a simple and easy to understand format. We're excited about our new website and have already implemented some of the features that we were requested that the users wanted. But please review the website and provide feedback because it's so new. We can still make adjustments, and it's a living document, just like a living website, and we're going to continue to make improvements. With that, the last slide is just thank you for your time, and I'm willing to listen to your input and answer your questions, and thank you for your opportunity today.
Well, thank you, Mr. Dietrich, and thank you, Ms. Jones, for continuing the slideshow. Excuse me, for bringing forward the slideshow. A couple of things really quick. Ms. McGrath kind of mentioned time. Each Tuesday, we have public testimony, and we never can quite tell how many people will show up for public testimony. Last week, for instance, we had, I think it was greater than an hour of public testimony. Today, it was a pretty small number of people testified. Consequently, the times that you see on our agendas are more or less rough. We don't completely adhere to the agenda, but I'll mention that I personally made a mistake, and I'll apologize to everyone. I put this down for a 10-minute item today, not understanding, Mr. Dietrich, you didn't do anything wrong. I understand that you had a full presentation. It's a great presentation that's going to spur a number of questions. We do have time on today's agenda, so we're not going to push the time at all. We're going to spend as much time as we need to on this particular item. I'll mention this. Yes, right now I'm looking at the air quality in Eugene, and it says it's 27. Good. I looked at this time yesterday. It said 273, very unhealthy. So it's a pretty, when we have active wildfires, it's a pretty fleeting thing. And I'm looking at the map right now, Mr. Dietrich, and that plume where it's nice and clear here, just about looks like 15 miles that way is dark red. If that comes this way, it's going to be just as smoky again today. So with that, to the Board of Commissioners, questions and comments. Commissioner Burney, I'm going to look to you first, since you introduced Mr. Dietrich. Anything you'd like to add?
Oh, no. I just want to say there are so many things going on, right? So I really am pleased that you could meet Commissioner Buck, because obviously Oak Ridge and West Fur are areas in her district, and the more collaboration, the better. And she's also working, bringing resources in. So I'm delighted that could occur. I know Steve Adams, we have so many Steves around here, was here, and he's in charge, among other things, of integrating climate action as just a ubiquitous way of doing business for the county. So the closer aligned you are there. I just appreciate the presentation and the opportunity, Commissioner Farr, and leave it to commissioners with questions. I've been living with this for 4 years, and I'm delighted with the progress that's been made.
Thank you, Commissioner Burney. And you're currently serving as the representative. I've served as the representative in the past. Commissioner Bosevich for years was the representative to LRAPA. And I believe that Lanes is the only regional air pollution authority in Oregon at this point in time. And it's here for a particular reason, because you do a lot of the administration of standards that in other counties, DEQ administers those standards. So LRAPA provides a very powerful, a strong and welcome function in Lane County. So thank you for that. Vice Chair Trieger.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you so much for the presentation and welcome. It's great to have you here and meet you. I have first a very sort of layperson question. A friend of mine was saying, what do you have on your agenda? And I mentioned this item, and they said, can you ask them why the weather app air quality reading is always different? So I use AirVisual. I rely on LRAPA's data to really understand the air quality, because the weather app data is often as much as 80, 100 points different. So I tell them, download the AirVisual, use LRAPA's data, because my guess is there's more sensors in more places, so you get a more accurate, specific reading to your location if you turn your location on your devices. But is there anything else you want to say about that, about the accuracy of the readings and why they can be different depending what app you use?
Chair and members of the commission, sometimes the data that is viewed on some websites, they get it from more of a general area. And a lot of times the monitor information that we have locally, if you go to our website, for example, you can get local monitor by monitor information. The air quality index is calculated, you know, it's a dimensionless scale that is calculated from the monitors that are collecting data live. Sometimes from one area to the next, that data can be different, which sets a different air quality index value.
Thank you. And my other question is, I know the acronym has stayed the same, but it's actually now the Lane Regional Air Protection, not pollution. And so anything else you want to share? I know we've talked about Oak Ridge, and there's been a lot of work done around folks who rely on wood heat, for example, as they're, you know, putting wildfires aside. And hopefully it would be great if we could put wildfires aside, but there's a lot that impacts air quality other than wildfire. So do you want to take just a minute to talk about what are some of those other common things that we find and what we're doing to protect the airshed?
Certainly. Part of that targeted airshed grant effort that's going on at Oak Ridge that can be applied anywhere is to put in and encourage people to replace their old wood stoves with more efficient EPA approved models, because that would greatly cut down on the amount of pollution going into the air. Even though everyone likes to burn in the wintertime, that's sometimes weather-wise, it's not very good timing when it comes to air quality and what the monitors show. If we do our part individually as well as partners to reduce as much particulate pollution as we can actually anticipate and possibly be ready for the next round of EPA lowering the standards in the not too distant future and still stay in an attainment rather than a non-attainment situation, which can really have an impact on economic development and our health.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Vice Chair Trigger. Commissioner Buck.
Thank you, Chair. I appreciate getting to know you a little bit better and all that your agency does. You know, speaking of Oak Ridge and all the work that they've done for so many years to try to get that air quality down. And lately, I look at the Purple Air site daily, if not multiple times per day. And when there are wildfires in their area or even fairly far away, you know, it kind of gets sucked into that valley right there next to the water. And they've been living with air quality rates 500, 600, 700s this last week, essentially making it uninhabitable to live up there. And yet at the same time, we see your chart showing they've been able to lower their air quality over time. How does the effect of those massive wildfires that we're getting, I call them mega fires now, because that's essentially what they are every single year in East Lane. And how does that go into the calculation of what you're using in to show success or the unsuccessful monitoring and trying to keep them in that better air quality range?
Chair, Commissioner Buck, it's a really good question because we face that every year, just like many states do when wildfires hit our area. And our ambient monitors monitor that air, whether it's anthropogenic or if it's wildfires that happen that weren't started by man. They all have an effect on air quality. So there is a mechanism in place that EPA allows us to use, and that's called exceptional events. It allows us to take the data that occur during wildfire events and have that discounted when it comes to being able to show whether or not you're in attainment or not with that particular pollutant. And we exercise that right quite often. Otherwise, we'd be facing a lot worse non-attainment classification than would otherwise happen. Right now, we're in a good good period with being in attainment. We'd like to keep it that way. So in coordination with using that as a tool, along with working with some of the other agencies that I mentioned earlier about smoke management and dealing with their their particular missions and what they're being tasked with doing to reduce the events of wildfire. It's going to take some time, but I think they have a strategy in place that if we all do our parts as our individual agencies can, it will start to make a difference.
If I may,
Please continue. Yeah.
so you had mentioned you take that data from wildfires and exclude it basically from the calculation as an abnormal event.
Right.
In reality, this is a normal event now. These mega fires and wildfires happen every year, all the time in Oregon. So I have some questions and concerns about removing that data for accuracy purposes, but what are the penalties if you don't meet attainment?
What can happen, Chair and Commissioner Buck? These are really good questions, and I'd love to spend more time talking to you about the details of this. The exceptional event is just a tool to help keep an area from being more severe non-attainment or being in non-attainment for any length of time. If you can avoid that data, it doesn't put aside the health effects of that event, but it does allow localities to function both economically in business and from being able to attract new business to your area. If you're classified as higher non-attainment towards the extreme, it becomes more difficult for those industries to come in and get an air permit. Their permit limits would have much stricter limits, and they may or may not be able to do business in Lane County. That's what it means.
Thank you. I look forward to talking to you.
Thank you for the questions, Commissioner. And thank you for being here this morning. It's a pleasure to meet you. Your predecessor was around a long time and had a great deal of respect throughout the community. You have big shoes to fill, but I suspect that you'll step right into them.
Thank you very much for that vote of confidence.
All right. Well, we'll look forward to hearing from you again. And I'm not certain if we'll have a more frequent update from you, but we talk about wildfires, and wildfires are, of course, an aberration, unless Commissioner Buck's predictions come true. And right now, for instance, I'm looking at Oak Ridge, and however clear the air happens to be right here, it's just dropped to 235 in Oak Ridge. So we're at 27 right now here. What that's PP? Is that ppm? That's yeah.
Again, Mother Nature can always outweigh what we do, and the weather has a big impact on where that smoke goes.
In fact, it does. Yeah. Well, thank you very much, Mr. Dietrich. Thank you, and thank you, Commissioner Burney, for bringing that forward to us. Let's move down the agenda to item 7, which is Health and Human Services. We have before us Order 2210-11-06 in the matter of approving 2 contracts, 2 amendments, and 1 ratification, and delegating the authority to the county administrator to sign the approved actions. And Mr. Mokrajewski, today we have Ms. Inman, but I'll let you introduce your panel.
Thank you, Chair Kachini Inman, our Assistant Director in Health and Human Services. Go ahead.
Good morning, Chair Farr and Commissioners. I have a brief item for you today. So I'll go through each of the contracts amendments and the ratification. The first contract is with the City of Springfield, and this is ARPA pass-through funds through Senator Beyer. And these funds are to support housing development across the spectrum, and that work is really happening with the City of Springfield. So again, just pass-through funds. The second contract is for Homes for Good, and this is for service funding for the NEL, one of our Housing First projects. And then I'll move on to the amendments. We have 2, one with the Oregon Health Authority. The first is to support the Nurse Family Partnership and Healthy Families Oregon, a really critical piece of work for our department. And then shelter care, and this is the McKenzie Rapid Rehousing, and this is to support our medically fragile unhoused individuals. And then lastly, the ratification, and this is through Lane County Workforce Services, and this will provide employment and training services to SNAP recipients. So happy to answer any questions that you may have.
In about 3 minutes, you just spent calculating well over $1 million. But that's an indication. Anybody who's watching this online can click on View Items. You'll see the detailed reports from the contracts that we're talking about right now, and all of the people that we serve through these contracts. Ms. Inman, thank you for bringing these forward. I'm sure there are going to be questions from the board. I'm, shouldn't be quiet. Oh, there we go. Commissioner Burney.
Thank you, Chair. I knew you would have filled the space had I not. First off, I want to state that I have no conflict of interest in voting for this. I don't represent the city of Springfield, and I am on the Lane Workforce Partnership Board, but have no interest in that. I think all of these are great, good to go. I have no concerns or questions about any, and thank you, Ms. Inman. It's nice to see you again.
Thank you, Commissioner Burney. Further questions? Then I will fill a little bit of time. You know, the one to the city of Springfield is of particular interest to me, $1.58 million.
Yep.
Dollars, and it's for acquire land assets within the city of Springfield. Don't have details on approximately how much. Do you know how many properties? And
Yeah, we actually don't have those details. So really, our role here is pass-through funding.
This is pass-through.
You may have remembered with the ARPA dollars, a lot of that was asked to be passed through through the county. So I don't have those details, but as we learn of them, I'm happy to bring those back.
And you don't need to. I'm going to call on Commissioner Burney. I wanted to make a point, but the money is passed through, and the determination on how it's spent is largely made by the city of Springfield.
It is, absolutely.
Thank you.
Thank you.
And it was, thank you, Chair. And it was specifically designed that way, you know, in working with Senator Byer and Representative Lively and the city of Springfield. So sitting on the CETA Springfield Economic Development Agency board, I do know where some of those dollars are being planned. But since they're in negotiation, at this point in time, I think that discretion is the better part of valor. And I'm not going to identify certain properties, but it is in process, and it does relate to economic development, largely in the Glenwood area.
Thank you, Commissioner. And I'll call on you, Commissioner Trieger. Want to mention that we talk about homelessness quite a bit, and quite frankly, people wonder what we're doing quite often out loud. What are you doing about homelessness? Well, here's a pass-through amount of money that's going directly to the city of Springfield for self-determination how to spend it. Commissioner Trieger, Vice Chair Trieger.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you for the presentation. My question is on the nurse-family partnership. I'm always going to be excited to see the maternal child health programs receive their funding. And I may be mixing and matching, but as I recall during budget, we were adding a number of positions. So if I'm not mistaken, this is two, but two of how many, or am I? No, I'm remembering that's developmental disabilities. That's the 5 DD positions.
Yes.
So, but I will still ask the question, not as it relates to a decision we made during budget. This is 2 new positions. Is that right for the nurse family partnership, or is this renewal of existing?
This is renewal. This is, so sorry, give me one moment. This is revenue, $1.4 million to support nurse family partnership and Healthy Families Oregon. I don't have specifics on positions. That all happened during the budget process and throughout supplementals.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, I guess my question writ large is, does this get us, does this cover us fully, and are we as staffed as we want and had planned to be for the home visiting and nurse family partnership program?
That's a great question. There's a lot of need in that area. I was just in some conversation this week with some of our staff, and you know, they're doing incredible work. They're reaching as far as they can, but as you know, this is a critical service to our community, and there's more need than we have resources, but I think we're doing a tremendous job with what we have at this time, and happy to, again, provide more of those details and get more information from our folks that are working hard in that program area.
Thank you. Yeah, I'd love to hear what the sort of overarching staffing plan, what an ideal staffing plan would look like and where we are relative to that. And I'll be learning more. I'm on a statewide nurse family partnership advocacy team that's working through a coordinated regional, Washington, Oregon regional approach to look at some options for the legislative session to shore up nurse family partnership programs statewide. But, you know, Chair Farr mentioned we often hear about homelessness, and often what I remind people is some of what we're doing about homelessness prevention is things like nurse family partnership and home visiting, because we know maternal child wellness is sort of the canary in the coal mine. And it's one of the most upstream approaches we can take to stabilizing families and helping people stay housed. So, so thank you for that. And yeah, at some point I would love to hear more about the overall what our resources are relative to the need and what the gaps are, so we can maybe work to fill them.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you, Vice Chair. Further discussion, comments? Then I'm just going to say this. You know, we see you every now and then. You come and make brief presentations to us on sometimes large amounts of money, sometimes smaller programs. But I'd like to say this, Ms. Mokraski. I've told you before that I love catching people doing things right. And when you catch people doing things right, you like to highlight it, because I was in no less than 4 meetings, I believe it was last week, that you were personally at, spending a great deal of time working directly with the people that we serve, answering questions, stepping forward, and making sure that I was equipped to handle the questions that I was called upon to answer. The one that I wanted to point out was the Schenkel respite center that we reopened last week as a county center that once again addresses homelessness. It's a facility that Shelter Care ran in the past. It was named for Reverend Schenkel, who originally had a sanctuary there, one of the earliest sanctuaries for African American people in Lane County, in fact, in the state, as a matter of fact. And we're repurposing it, and I believe that 12 people are going to be able to shelter, to sleep and live there, as 12 people with acute needs who would otherwise be homeless. So thank you for letting me catch you do something right. It's not hard to catch. Thank you again, Ms. Inman. Vice Chair?
I'll make the motion.
Yeah, we need a
ready.
motion.
We do need a motion. I was going to send you out the door.
Not so fast.
Vice Chair Trigger.
Thank you, Chair. I move approval of Order 22-10-11-06 in the matter of approving 2 contracts, 2 amendments, and 1 ratification, and delegating authority to the county administrator to sign the approved actions.
I'll second.
Moved by Vice Chair Trigger and seconded by Commissioner Buck. Order 22-10-11-06. And once again, for those of you maybe watching online or sometime beyond this date, watching it, you can click on today's view material and get the exact the detail of what the board is passing today. So with that, discussion to the motion. Vice Chair, Commissioner Bernie.
Once Vice Chair.
Former Vice Chair Bernie.
I just want to say, you mentioned that one of these items is consistent with the county's housing first, right? And I just wanted to reemphasize that the county's contracts and directions of meeting people where they are, trying to provide shelter and working with them, is something that I hope never changes. Thank you so very much. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Further discussion of the motion? I see none. I'll call for the vote. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Passes 4-0 with Commissioner Bozovich excused absent. Thank you, Ms. Inman. Then moving down, we're moving directly along to item 8, County Council announcements. I understand today there are no announcements from County Council, Mr. Mokraski. So we'll move along to County Administration. And 9A is a first reading and setting the second reading and public hearing on Ordinance 22-08 in the matter of amending Lane Code Chapter 4 to make administrative corrections and declaring an emergency. Ms. Mokraski,
I was looking around the room to say, is Jeff here? Jeff here? And they're all pointing at the screen. So Jeff Kincaid, our management analyst, is here with us virtually.
Thank you, Mr. Mokraski. Sorry to psych you out there. I'm usually sitting right there next to you. So good morning, Chair Farr, Commissioners. My name is Jeff Kincaid. I'm a management analyst in County Administration. This ordinance before you today is being brought forward to make 3 administrative corrections to our recent work in Lane Code Chapter 4 that we did through Ordinance 2206 and 2207. So the 3 corrections are removing references to certificates of authority. Oregon Department of Revenue has let us know as we've worked through this process that they didn't intend to issue those. So we're just cleaning up that language. Clearly establishing January 1st, 2023 as the date the increase to car rental tax will take effect. It was listed in the packet and didn't make it into the code, so we're correcting that. And then clarifying language on tax imposed that are not calculable to a whole cent. This ordinance also declares an emergency. The only reason for this is to ensure that these changes take effect quickly so that we avoid having a time period where the increase to car rental tax is effective and then having it rolled back to January 1st. So this emergency will allow it to just become effective January 1st as intended. So staff recommends that the board move to approve the first reading and set the second reading and public hearing for Ordinance 22-08 for October 25th, 2022 at 1:30 p.m. time certain. So I'll now pass back to you, Chair Farr, for discussion and potential action. Thank you.
Thank you, Captain Kincaid. Then any discussion questions? This is the first reading and setting the second reading, and we do have a date certain on the second reading. I'll turn it over to a motion. Oh, Vice Chair Trigger.
Thank you, Chair. I'll move approval of a first reading and set the second reading and public hearing for October 25th, 2022 with a 1:30 time certain on ordinance number 22-08 in the matter of amending Lane Code Chapter 4 to make administrative corrections and declaring an emergency.
So in the spirit of Commissioner Buck and I are the only two that can second a motion right now. I will second that. Thank you. Thank you.
No, it's not your turn.
Yeah, it is my turn.
Okay, moved by Vice Chair Trigger and seconded by Commissioner Burney. We have first reading and setting the second reading and public hearing on ordinance 2208. Since this is the first reading, Mr. Mokrajskin, since it is indeed an ordinance but not final passage, we do not require a roll call vote on this. So I will call for the vote. Those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Passes 4-0 with Commissioner Bozovic absent excused. And moving down to item 9B, we have. Thank you, Mr. Kincaid. Then we'll move along to order 2210-1107 in the matter of appointing members to the Lane County Charter Review Committee. And today, Mr. Mokrajsky, we have your panel of Ms. Williams and Ms. Cuzumano. I'll turn it over to you.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, we have two of our outstanding staff in County Administration, Jenna Cuzumano, who's our interim Community and Economic Development Manager, and Judy Williams, our Strategy and Integration Manager. Both Jenna and Judy have taken the lead on this effort. I really appreciate their leadership, their coordination, and engagement here with the board on what is a really important process to develop the Charter Review Committee and process to review and update the charter, the Lane County Charter. So I'll turn over to Jenna and Judy to walk through that process.
Good morning, Chair Farr, Commissioners. Thank you so much for your time this morning. So in July, the board did ask staff to begin the process of convening a Charter Review Committee as outlined in the Lane County Charter every 10 years. The vacancies were posted for a period of 3 weeks. I did catch a typo in the board packet materials, so it was from a period of August 11th through September 1st, not August 25th. That would have only been a week. We did receive a total of 12 applications through that process. We reviewed each of the applicants' conflict of interest statements, as well as having an analyst from the Oregon Government Ethics Commission completing a secondary review. Through those reviews, we determined that there were no actual or potential conflicts of interest with any of the applicants' information submitted. We provided the board with those 12 applications on September 9th for commissioners to select their appointee preferences. Commissioner appointees were processed in the order received and are outlined in the board order before you. Should you approve the board order today, you will be appointing the initial 5 members of the Charter Review Committee. Staff will then coordinate an initial meeting of those 5 appointed members who will subsequently nominate 2 additional members, which will be subsequently appointed by the board to complete the 7-member committee. Those final 2 members will be appointed by the board as a whole and not by individual commissioners. So with that, that's all the material I have for you. Chair Farr, in case there's any questions or further discussion from the board.
Right on. Then I'll turn it over to the board for questions. Vice Chair Trigger.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you for the presentation and for the work on this really important item. Just for a point of clarification to get it into the record, and apologies if you just said it in your presentation, the 2 remaining to make a full 7-member Charter Review Committee, the 5, should they be appointed, will choose those 2 from the original pool of applicants that we have also reviewed. Is that correct?
Well, that is not necessarily outlined in the charter or the bylaws for the committee. I have received a subsequent application that I will present to the initial 5 appointed members for consideration, or if they only want to review the 7 outstanding applications that would not be appointed at this stage.
So that's an application we have not seen.
You have not seen it, correct? It was just received yesterday.
But we did post a deadline for receipt of applications for this committee. So it came in after the deadline.
Correct.
Thank you.
Thank you, Vice Chair. For the discussion, Commissioner Burney.
First, personally, thank you for putting up with me through this process, Jenna.
Not a problem.
When is this group going to meet for their first meeting?
That is still to be determined. We don't have any formal dates or times that's set for the committee other than what's currently in the bylaws, but we are not aware of whether or not those outlined dates and times would work for the appointed members. So we want to find a time that would be amenable to all the members, whether it be virtual or in person, whether they be evening or during regular working hours, is still to be determined.
On the outside, though, I mean, is this something that you want to convene by a certain point?
Ideally later this month, by the end of the month. So we would be coming to you in November, hopefully with those final 2 nominations.
Okay, thank you so much.
Thank you, Commissioner.
Thank
you. No, yes, no. Then I want to thank you for the work on this. It's not every day that we go through a charter review. In fact, if you want to come to my office, just step down the hallway. I have the original charter printed, actually, as it was printed in the Register Guard, which was a much larger sized paper back then. It's actually a paper that
it was paperback,
but it's I took it down off the wall. It's not hanging in my office anymore, and you can see the original charter review charter committee members, and I believe Ken Tolinar, who later served as Eugene City Council and one of my heroes, was on that board back in the 1950s, I think is what the date is on it, whatever the original date was. So thank you for your work on that. It's once again, we don't often review the charter. This is very serious work. We each had 1 appointment, and the appointees are listed on the order that we'll be considering in a few moments. Do we need to name the appointees? Would you like to do that?
It's up to you all. If you'd like to
I can
name
do
them
it,
out loud.
Vice Chair.
Thank you, Chair. May I just add a comment/question just for the record and for anyone watching, and just to clarify and remind me, the scope of this committee is to identify whether, if there are items in our charter that need amending or adding. This is not necessarily the committee that would then do that work. This is a committee that would identify any work
Correct.
that needs to be done or that they recommend be done on our charter. And then there would be another process to determine which, if any of those items get taken up, which go to voters versus our housekeeping or that sort of thing, right? I just want to get on the
Correct.
record.
Ultimately, the board would be referring any of the changes or amendments to the voters for approval.
Thank you.
And to put that in perspective, we have 3 different documents that we work on as our general guidelines. There's a charter, the code, and the manual. The charter requires voter approval, any changes. The code requires Board of Commissioners approval, and the manual typically can be done by administrative. No, that's also order.
Yeah, the charter requires voter approval. The code requires an ordinance. So you just took up the item of a first reading and a second reading, and public hearing is set, and then a roll call vote. That's required for the code. And then the manual also is changed by the board, but that is typically done via a board order through one action, as opposed to the code, which is considered local law that requires 2 votes of the board. And then the administrative procedural manual, the APM, those are sort of the day-to-day operating policies and procedures that the county administrator and our leadership team work on developing.
That you have the authority to work on. So voter approval, ordinance, and order are the three documents. Okay, great. Then, do I have a motion?
Well, Chair, thank you. And then finally, do you need any direction or input from this board for that outlying application and how to manage that? Because we did set a deadline and that did come in after, so I don't know where we are.
So I guess the interpretation that I need was that deadline for just the initial 5 appointees, or was that for the entire process?
We hadn't clarified that in the vacancy posting. I had someone who had reached out just last week to see. I said I could provide it to those initial 5 appointees for consideration, but gave no guarantees that it would be potentially submitted for those final 2.
And I'm still not clear about that. Since we didn't actually say that the deadline is strictly for the 5 appointees to be made by the board, and we didn't open it up for further applicants. I don't know. What does the board think about that?
I think it poses an interesting question, because does that mean you're going to accept applications a week from now or a week and a half from now? How open-ended is this? Is my question, Chair.
That really is a decision the board can make this morning. If you would like to not have that 13th application submitted to the 5 initial appointees for consideration as a nomination, I'm perfectly fine. There was no outlying rules as to how to handle any applications between the initial 5 appointees and then that subsequent 2 nominations. So it's up to you if you would like to not have that submitted for consideration.
Okay. Continue? No?
Yeah, but I can go after.
Okay, Commissioner Buck.
Yeah. Okay, thanks. Thank you, Commissioner. I didn't anticipate this, but I would think in fairness that, and other commissioners may want to limit it to the first 12, but my feeling is that we cut it off now, that this is a public discussion and a public decision. Because I care less, but I'm uncomfortable with this, this forever kind of a thing without any kind of structure so people have that. And I think that's pretty lenient because really the time frame that was given was given. But anyway, thank you, Chair, and I'm sorry, Commissioner.
Commissioner Buck?
I think it should be limited to the original applications and the original date. I just think that's the most transparent. Otherwise, we could have been receiving other applications all this time and we hadn't been advertising that. And I think that's unfair to the public. And I would strongly urge to limit it to the original applications.
Okay, I have the gavel, right? Vice Chair.
Thank you, Chair. And I'll just note on our website, when we recruited for applications, we did say completed applications must be received by 5 p.m. Thursday, September 1st. We didn't say for board appointment, for the committee over. It was a posting about the formation of the Charter Review Committee and that there was an application period and that it had a closing date. And again, I want to restate, we have not seen this applicant. So this is in no way anyone here trying to make any kind of comment on who this late applicant is in any way. It's really a process integrity question for me.
Thank you for all of the input. And Commissioner Burney has a good point, to allow the 13th applicant. The only way that seems fair is if we posted the deadline sometime beyond this, because other people might say, oh, I thought the application was over and I didn't apply. So I guess I'm in concurrence with what seems to be the majority here. Let's hold it at the 12 and have the remaining 7 considered by the 5 who have been appointed.
That's completely understandable. I'll notify that 13th applicant.
That doesn't require a gavel stroke, but that's good.
And that's unanimous.
That just became unanimous.
For what it's worth.
Not that we voted on it, but we are in a public session. Then I'm going to mention the names of the 5 who have been appointed, and I'll name the commissioner who appointed them. It's in the order, it's right online. So it's Ben Clark, who I appointed. Steve Karnakia was appointed by Commissioner Bozovich. Jenny Jonak was appointed by Commissioner Buck. Morgan Monroe by Commissioner Trieger, and Stefan Ostrach by Commissioner Burney. Then do I have a motion? Vice Chair.
Chair, I'll move approval of Order 22-10-11-07 in the matter of appointing members to the Lane County Charter Review Committee.
Good job. You're alternating nicely. Moved by Vice Chair Trieger and seconded by Commissioner Buck. Order 22-10-11-07, discussion of the motion. I'm seeing none. I'll call for the vote. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Passes 4-0 with Commissioner Bozovich absent excused. Thank you very much. Ms. Williams, is there anything you don't do for Lane County?
It's involved in a lot.
In a lot of things, indeed. Then we'll move down the list to, let's see what. So item 9C, which is a discussion on the quarterly holiday farm fire recovery update. And if this board has questions beyond that, we may extend beyond that a little bit. But Mr. Mokryski, you have a panel with you. I'll turn it over to you for introduction.
Chair. Steve Adams, our policy director, and Matt McCrae, who you all know as our McKenzie River recovery coordinator. Matt, I think, has a presentation here and is going to walk through. And this work now is part of the policy team. As you know, we have developed this policy team over the course of the last, gosh, what has it been, 6 months or so? And it continues to evolve and expand, and really excited about the work that's happening on that team, and certainly the continued great work that Matt and others in the community are doing around the recovery for the Holiday Farm fire. So take it away, Matt.
Thank you. Good morning, Chair Farr, Commissioners. Thanks for making the time on your agenda for an update. For the record, Matt McCray, I'm the Disaster Recovery Manager for Lane County, focused on the Holiday Farm fire, and with me is Steve Adams, the Policy Director. Proposing Chair Farr, we'll do an overview of some of the regular items that I have provided updates on in the past, and take the first 20 minutes to do that, and then take the last 25 minutes to dig into a thicker issue of our conversation with Oregon Housing and Community Services. So I'll just do a very brief 10-minute overview, and then we'll take questions on that item. So as per usual, just starting with our sheltering figures, these are the numbers. We have 60 individuals who are currently sheltering in hotels in Eugene and in the FEMA direct housing mission in Rainbow. So we can see the numbers are continuing to steadily go down. And I will remind us that we are over 2 years out past the fire now, and still have many people living in hotels. We're certainly doing everything we can to find solutions for those individuals. We, Lane County, as well as Homes for Good and our partners at DHS. But it is a tough nut to crack with those families that are still in sheltering. And then moving on to permit figures, and I'm going to start here and pause, which is the number of dwellings lost in the Holiday Farm fire. If you recall, last time we met, the figure I provided was 574 dwellings lost. And now we are reporting 517 dwellings lost. So I'm going to back up for just a minute. We had a damage assessment right after the fire that was done fairly quickly by folks who weren't necessarily local, and the estimate was 464 dwellings lost. And then we had a team of county staff do an in-field review looking closer, and their number came back at 574. We shared that with community members and locals in the fire-affected area, and they raised some concerns about some of the records in that updated damage assessment. And so in responding to their concerns, we hired LCOG to do a line-by-line review of our damage assessment. And so this is the result, is that the total number, of course, there are other figures besides the total dwellings lost, but as an indicator, the total number of dwellings lost is reduced to 517. So after having that extensive review done by LCOG, we're very confident in this number. I will say that damage assessments are always slightly imperfect, so it probably doesn't represent exact truth, but we're much more confident that this represents reality better than the other two estimates we've had. Sorry for the long-winded explanation, but you may get questions about this, so hence my explanation. So that is now, I'm using the 517 as the baseline for comparisons about dwelling permits, for examples. So we have 222 dwelling permits that were submitted as of yesterday, which is 43% of the total dwellings lost. 211 permits issued. So our team is really keeping up with the requests for permits. And then going to look at the number of dwellings completed, we have 87 dwellings, Holiday Farm fire, that are now completely constructed. So that's 17% of the total dwellings lost, and 39% of the total number of permits submitted. And then this is just to show you the same numbers in a trend to give you a sense of how things are moving. And you can see that the numbers of building permits submitted and homes completed continues to trend upward. It's not moving super fast, but they are continuing to move up with every quarterly update we're providing for you. There's obviously a significant amount of work yet to do to get those homes replaced. And then separately, but related, the number of properties affected by the fire was 600, and we've seen 167 properties sold. So 28% of the total number of properties affected by the fire have been sold. And we continue to have a large number of families that are taking advantage of our free emergency RV permit program. So currently 93 folks who have free emergency RV permits and are assumedly living in those at least part of the time while they're reconstructing their homes. And this is the same figure I provided you last time. I just want to acknowledge that it's over $1 million so far in permit fees waived, but that figure is not updated since last time we met. And now I'm going to shift slightly just to review a handful of projects that are going on in the recovery area. This is by no means all of the projects that are going on, but I just want to highlight for you how much is happening right now. The first year, there was a lot of trying to figure out where, which way forward and who are the partners and how do we make this work. And we are now into the thick of it, where there's just a lot of planning and a lot of projects moving forward. From my perspective, the recovery gets more complicated because we have so many partners doing so much really digging in work. So I'm just going to touch on a few of these. I'm not going to highlight all of them, but just want to touch on the Transportation Growth Management Project, which is being led by our Land Management Division. That's really looking at the zoning in Blue River and giving us an opportunity to revisit the land use zones and contemplate other options for how can we enable people to redevelop in Blue River specifically. It's an important project. And is starting this fall. So it's getting underway. I also want to call out the Blue River Wastewater System. I think you're all familiar that there's a concerted effort and funds from the state to invest in a wastewater system for Blue River, which is really fundamental to enabling the reconstruction there. We just had test wells dug this last week to do percolation tests to make sure we're picking the right site for drain fields for that particular, for one of the particular systems that is being contemplated. Just want to acknowledge the work of Rob Woodard, who is working in Public Works and leading that work along with the Blue River Water District. I also want to acknowledge work happening in that same shop along with Jay Blamé. There's a consolidated boundary survey in Blue River to help do an updated survey looking at all the property boundaries in Blue River. There is an RFP going out to get that work done. Should happen this week or next week. So that is moving forward. And then I'm just going to touch on county supported recovery projects. So that last list was county led. These are county supported. There are a number of projects going on here. Really, that's my point, is just to help you all see how much is moving forward and recognize the good work of so many partners to make all of this happen. I do want to call out just one item here. Oregon Solutions is doing intensive outreach in the very near future at the request of a communications and outreach committee of that group. They've compiled a complete list of resources available to serve wildfire survivors, and they're going to do intensive one-on-one outreach to folks who they feel may have fallen through the cracks, who aren't being served by disaster case managers or otherwise have been unable to get connected with resources. And that's all I have. Oh, I'm sorry. I want to make one more point here while I can, is that this is largely looking backward, right? An update on where we've been. And there's a lot of work looking forward at mitigation. So it's important that we do recovery and we do that as wisely as we possibly can. And part of that is investing in mitigation so that the next time we have a fire, the homes that are being rebuilt right now are less vulnerable to that fire. I'll acknowledge that the state has put dollars forward to help those affected by the Holiday Farm fire to rebuild with materials and construction techniques that reduce their susceptibility to fire. I also want to acknowledge the work of my colleague Patience Winningham, who is leaning in here and always has been. She has secured Title III funds to support a position that will coordinate fuels reduction in alignment with our community wildfire protection plan. And she has applied for additional funds for a community wildfire defense grant to fund a position to execute items outlined by that community wildfire protection plan. So I can't emphasize enough the importance of our continued investment in mitigation and the fact that our team, patients in particular, is really leaning in there to make sure that we're making those investments to the greatest degree possible. That's all I have for this portion of the presentation. So I can take questions on any of these slides if you like, or my previous comments. And then once we're done there, I'll turn it over to Steve Adams, who's going to give a briefing on our conversation with Oregon Housing and Community Services. Sure.
Right on. Thank you for a good presentation, Ms. McRae. Those slides contain a great deal of information that we can pass along directly. I want to thank you also for mentioning Patience Winningham. I was at the Oregon Emergency Managers Association meeting. A large number of people from all over the state gave Patience a standing ovation last week for her work. You really, Ms. McRae, she really is doing outstanding work with about this many words. That's about how many words she had last week. So then I'll turn it over to the board if we have questions now. Different kind of presentation, Mr. Adams. So we'll go for questions right now if that doesn't interfere with your presentation. Vice Chair Buck, excuse me, Commissioner Buck. We're all vice chairs.
At one point, we have that. Yeah, I'm fairly on top of this information with the policy team. I visit quite often. Rebuilding an entire community that is tens and tens of miles in stretch is no small feat. The items you listed up above, just had like 6 of them. There's well over a dozen and more, if not 20 or more, of things that are going on at any given point in time. And Ms. McRae, you're the one, kind of the center of all this stuff. And I want to thank you for your continued work and effort, even though I know you're transitioning into the policy team. But you're kind of the glue that keeps us together. So thank you very much. I'll keep any other remaining comments till later.
Thank you, Commissioner. Further comments? Vice Chair Trigger.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, as always, for the presentation and the excellent work. And also for giving Patience Winningham a shout out. Well deserved. Can't shout her out too many times. She's exceptional. I just had a data point question. I want to make sure I'm understanding. You had a slide about 600 affected properties, 517 of which were dwellings, but they're inclusive. They're covered in that 600, right?
Yes.
And that 167 had been sold. I didn't do the quick math, but I guess my essential question is, do we have a sense of the difference that if 222 permits have been applied for lost dwellings out of 517, some of those are probably the 167 sold. Is that the primary reason people aren't applying for rebuild permits, is they're just deciding to sell the property as is?
I think that's a good question. I don't have a great answer for you in terms of diving right into that nexus. My sense is that there are plenty of people who are awaiting their resources to begin applying for a permit. There are dozens of households that had inadequate insurance or no insurance. And I think that's what we're bumping up into now. So those who are well insured are rebuilding or rebuilt, and those that are waiting on the sidelines have either sold or are looking for additional resources, which, by the way, are on the way coming through Oregon Housing and Community Services as a part of our next topic.
Well, maybe I'll learn more there, but I know the permit navigator that we hired, that we approved funding to hire specifically up there, is only working with people who are actively applying for permits. But I know there's the long-term recovery group and undoubtedly some other resources, I would hope, for the folks who were or underinsured.
Yes.
To navigate how to.
Yes. Yes. So we have disaster case managers who can support anybody who's trying to recover, including getting them acquainted with the permit process, or at least pointing them towards Marianne Nolte, who you just mentioned, who is remarkable in doing her work as a permit navigator. So yes, we have disaster case managers who do that. And yeah, again, my understanding is that Oregon Housing and Community Services intends to interact very directly with disaster survivors to help them navigate the process to gain access to dollars to help them rebuild.
Great, thank you.
Okay. Commissioner Burney.
Thank you, Chair. Data doesn't speak for itself. It has to be interpreted. So I'm just going to focus on 2 things. One is a statement and one is a question.
Sure.
The statement for anyone listening or who will listen. So this body waived, correct, all fees for rebuilding. And what I see, one of the points you made was that we have lost over $1 million in fees that the county would have had to support this enterprise fund, just so people could rebuild. So what I hear you saying is that was dollars well waived. Is that correct?
I believe so. Yes.
Yeah. And we also hired a number of additional staff. My concern is the people that are still homeless and over 2 years later are in hotels. Do we know that they all have all those families, all those people have a plan to get out of those hotels and get into permanent housing? And what are we doing in that regard?
Yeah, that's a great question. Yes, that is the point of the work right now with those families is to get them a solid plan that will get them into permanent housing. As you are all aware, the availability of affordable housing right now is extremely challenged, right? And I think that's just what we're bumping into, Commissioner Burney, is there just aren't enough options, and these families are also so many of them are extremely low income.
Right.
Yeah. So that is the work, is trying to find options, but it's been, I mean, I can't emphasize more how challenging that is at this particular point. We are going to come to a point where FEMA is going to stop providing reimbursement for disaster case management, and where they will close down the direct housing mission. We're not there yet, but as that time horizon comes up, I think that conversation will become more pressing. Though I will say, it's not all just on Lane County to try and find options there. We have Department of Human Services and other resources that are assisting.
And if I may, Chair, just please follow up. Thank you very much, Mr. McCray. So my understanding is, I forget the name of it. I was involved in helping us get a hotel, but that program where we could purchase hotels for housing, my understanding is that's coming back as part of that for fire. The county is affected by fire, is part of that to deal with this lingering, most needy group of people that are still in hotels. And that is a naive question on my part.
Yeah, correct. So we purchased Bridges on Broadway, which is a hotel that was then repurposed for sheltering. My understanding is that is intended to be rebuilt, the rooms rebuilt to be apartment-like. But I'm afraid I can't speak to exactly where that is in process right now, but that is the intent.
And my understanding is they're opening up another round of that. That's what I was.
Another round of funding for another hotel.
Yeah,
right. I was not aware.
I believe Commissioner Buck has a little bit of information on that.
So that was Project Turnkey.
Thank you.
And it was extremely popular all over the state. We benefited, of course, for wildfire. However, this round is for more than just wildfire victims.
Okay.
But it is coming.
Thank you. And thank you, Commissioner Burney. I have a couple of quick questions before we move on to the next round, or to Mr. Adams. Looking at the number of permits in process, seems a long time for processing permits. Can you talk about that a little bit? What are the delays in processing permits?
The primary delays, as I understand it, in the Holiday Farm Fire have been submission of incomplete permits. So permits are getting put forward that just don't have all the information necessary to get approved. But from my perspective, actually, the fact that there are only 11 still being reviewed, that's actually a relatively small number. When we look at the numbers in the past, it's been quite a few more that are still under review. And Holiday Farm Fire survivors get put to the top of the list still. So their permits are being reviewed on a priority order.
And thank you for that response. That eases my concern regarding, the fact that sometimes we hear that my permit's been in there for a year and nobody's working on it. we are processing these as quickly as we possibly can. And even though there are 60 or so dwellings that were destroyed that we don't have permits applied for yet, you've explained that a little bit with people are potentially underinsured. You know, I visited one lady in particular who had almost no insurance on her home. Nice home right on a creek, right just across the river from Blue River. And you probably know the exact home. And she wanted to move in a temporary dwelling until she could get the funding. Are we allowing people to move temporary dwellings? We do have 93, I believe, that are temporaries that are still active. But beyond that, if somebody wants to live in one for 5 years, are we allowing that?
My understanding is that there are options for temporary dwellings. And the RVs are allowed for up to 5 years at this point. They have to be renewed every 6 months. I don't know that very many people are opting for temporary dwellings that aren't RVs.
Mm-hmm. So moving in pre-manufactured tiny homes, we're not seeing much of that happen then.
I have seen that happen on a couple of individual sites where one property owner can purchase several and then rent those out. I haven't seen a large number of that on individual properties. However, I will say I'm not following the details on permits, so it's possible it's happening more than I'm aware of.
And I'll say I'm somewhat disappointed, not in any one person in particular, but disappointed that we weren't able to take that opportunity to allow people to move in tiny homes that are perfectly adequate for living, meet all of the needs for living, and far less expensive, and can be lived in for extended periods of time, while not necessarily having to meet the strenuous, sometimes really overly burdensome rules that we subject people to in building homes outside of urban growth boundaries in Oregon. The next question that I have is more, I guess, maybe a little bit more esoteric. We know the number of permitted dwellings that were destroyed. We never did get a good number on the other dwellings that were destroyed. We know that there were a lot of people living up there off the grid, so to speak. Maybe they were living in a unregistered RV in somebody's back lot. A lot of them. Did we ever get a number on those? Was there any way of reporting that? Because the reason I ask that is we talk about homelessness. We've already talked about it extensively today. People who lost their homes don't have a place to live. What does that make them? I mean, they're homeless. So what, any news on that?
Yeah, what I can report to you is that I looked under every rock to try and find a good answer to your question. And I didn't get anything that I felt was solid enough that we could publish it. So we don't have a formal number. But what I will tell you is from my many conversations with county staff and others who work in this area, there were somewhere on the order of about 100 RVs that were serving as dwellings for folks in the fire affected area.
Okay. And this is maybe a question that you don't know the answer to, but I'd like to know, how are those people being serviced, the people who lost their unregistered RVs, because they do need a place to live? Are we finding relief for them?
I think many of them are living in hotels in Eugene, Chair Farr.
So that's good. And then regarding well, I have another question that I'll come back to. Mr. Adams, why don't you go ahead with your presentation? You may answer my questions.
Okay, indeed. Good morning, Chair Farr, Commissioners. Thank you for the opportunity to provide some additional commentary this morning on our efforts. I think, Mr. Chairman, we are less than 30 days away from an election in which we will see a new governor elected. I think one of the most pressing questions for the next governor will be, how do we organize recovery moving forward? So the Labor Day fires of 2020 were arguably the most significant impact that Oregon has observed in certainly modern times from a disaster recovery perspective. And over the course of the last 25 months or so, we here in Lane County have dealt with no less than a dozen state agencies as part of the recovery process. Our experience with those agencies has been quite uneven. And we've had fantastic experiences with some of our state partners who really have worked as quickly as possible to move resources forward. And for many of the projects that Mr. McCray just reported on that are moving forward, those are funded with dollars that have moved fast, either dollars that you have set aside through the permit fee or dollars that were specifically earmarked for local projects here. We have, as you know, been keeping the board abreast of conversations with the department, the Oregon Housing and Community Services in particular. So this board has weighed in twice now on the federal community development block grant disaster recovery dollars that OHCS was designated within Oregon to receive from our federal partners, from the U.S. HUD. That was $422 million, and we received notice last week that was approved at the federal level. That action plan was approved, so that will enable those dollars to begin to flow. We have been engaged in a conversation with our partners at OHCS for months now on the shape of how those dollars will move. And as we have indicated, and this board has certainly provided its weight with respect to letters and commentary back to Director Bell and her team at OHCS about our concerns specifically. I really want to acknowledge Commissioner Buck's leadership on this issue. She has been a thought partner to Mr. Kyler, Mr. McCrae, and myself as we have really sought to try to move the needle on the conversations with our friends at OHCS. I would just note that in the 2021 legislative session, the Oregon legislature appropriated just over $150 million to OHCS for wildfire recovery. If you look at the plain text of the bill, it's quite obvious that it was for housing development, construction, infrastructure, rebuilding, down payment assistance, loans, and services associated with recovery. And as you all know, community services are required to make housing happen. You really do need infrastructure. You need to make specific aligned investments to make new houses reappear on the landscape. And our friends at OHCS have continued to push a funding formula that looks at only the percentage of housing lost. So of the $150 million, of course, what our friends at OHCS are indicating to us is that their specific mark would be $17 million, would be the total allocation to Wayne County, based solely on the 13.7% of the housing stock lost of the about 4,500 housing units that were lost during the Labor Day fires statewide. We have seen the movement of those dollars. So just 2 weeks ago, Commissioner Buck testified to the House Wildfire Oversight Recovery Committee during committee days and reported back to this board on her commentary. The fact of the matter is that we're 25 months past, and OHCS has moved less than 25 million of the 150 million. It was serious enough for the committee chair to require OHCS to come back to them with a monthly report on their progress in moving dollars out the door. We are now engaged in ongoing conversations with OHCS. They are proposing what they are how they get to their $17 million allocation to Wayne County. They are now proposing an intergovernmental agreement to Wayne County to move almost nearly $4.8 million of flexible funds to us to be able to allocate and program across the specific projects that are in need of management and funding. We also know that with the approval of the federal CDBG DR funds, we were earmarked about $7 million in that initial allocation that they termed PEER, planning, infrastructure, and economic revitalization. That was what they earmarked as 10% of the total funds, and we argued was too low. Because of the challenges associated with getting houses built in a rural environment, which, as you know, the unit cost of infrastructure to a house in a rural environment is much higher than in a dense urban setting, right? The whole idea of the Rural Electrification Act recognized that last mile problem, for instance, requires additional investment. This is the core of the argument that we have continued to pursue with OHCS in ensuring that our Lane County fire victims receive their fair share of the appropriations. So we continue our conversations with OHCS. They apparently brought an item to the Housing Board, their governing body, this past Friday, indicating approval of moving forward with an IGA, though I think there's more details forthcoming that we're really quite keen to see. We just, in doing kind of an assessment, we think our infrastructure needs are somewhere in the area of about $40 million that remain unfunded upriver, and that would put the pieces in place that would enable us to do water and other infrastructure upgrades that would enable the houses to go in. And these are the things that we have to get done first before we can get housing and get families back into houses. So the conversation will continue. We have a gap, obviously, with our partners at OHCS. We believe that there is a broader conversation to be had. And certainly as we work with the next administration, I think we all need to recognize that we as Oregonians are learning right now about how to respond to wildfire. We had unfortunate events occur this past summer, and thankfully we did not lose any housing stock. We didn't open a new recovery front, which could have been the case up the 58 corridor. But we have to reasonably believe that in the future, we will have to cope with this again. And many of the hard-won lessons that my colleague, Mr. McCrae, has learned on our collective behalf in terms of how to do recovery, we have to do it well. And we hope that we can staff this board in transmitting our lessons learned to the next governor to ensure that Oregon does this well in the future.
Thank you, Mr. Adams. Good presentation. Any questions from Mr. Adams?
Missed one number. It went by a little too. You mentioned we've had the CDBG DR dollars that we've set aside. What was that number again?
So in the action plan, OHCS put forward to HUD, and the total allocation is $422 million for that action plan.
Yep.
OHCS proposed 10% of those dollars go to PEER, as they call it.
That's the 17.
And so that gets you to about 40, a little better than 40 million, right? And of that 40, they're proposing to allocate about 7 million to Wayne County. Yes,
7.8.
7.8, so nearly 8. I'm lowballing them.
Thank you.
So that is the federal funding source in which is separate from the state dollars. Some of the conversation that we've really been trying to engage in is recognizing that the CDBG DR funding comes with a lot of strings and a lot of federal requirements. The dollars that were appropriated by the legislature don't. They're extremely flexible. And some of the conversation that we have really been trying to have with our partners is that don't use really flexible dollars to cover tabs that really would fit nicely into the federal dollars. And we're seeing evidence of that in the way in which they're trying to program the state dollars.
Thank you.
Okay. Thank you. Commissioner Burney?
Thank you, Chair. Gosh, there's several things, Steve. One is keep trying to get local flexibility. I know you are. I mean, for 40 years, we've known that with silos, and you, Mr. McCrae, done a great job too. With silos come rules and regulations, and really the need is for immediate, quick action, flexibility, and the ability at the local level to make those decisions. But given the world as it is, unfortunately, help me here. Let's say, without getting into the explanations that you provided so aptly, let's just say that Lane County gets the dollars you're talking about. What will that buy us completely, and what will that only partially buy us in this rebuilding?
So Chair Farr, Commissioner Burney, it would go right into a suite of projects that are only partially funded currently. So that is going to, the dollars would come into wastewater development and completion. It would go into opportunities to continue to repair roads and other critical infrastructure. We've got fire stations that were not repaired in the list of about $40 million of lost infrastructure.
Okay, so it will completely capitalize those. Oh, that's great. And I remember I was chair last year when we developed those lists and we were able to get some state resources. So it sounds, Chair, I mean, I may not understand this completely, but it sounds like the goal here, and you think it's achievable, is to capitalize all of these projects which are currently not capitalized enough as it relates to rebuilding. Next question. I drove over to Bend last week to keynote a clean energy finance conference. I was amazed at the rebuilding that is going on. All the fresh wood being turned into, I mean, really, I was very impressed. I was also impressed with the fact that there are now federal dollars at this conference, we were told, that are not just for redoing what we did as we did, but in rural areas, creating community solar and storage so we don't have to rebuild so many transmission lines that oftentimes can cause fires, and in a variety of other ways, make that last mile of communities more self-sufficient and more resilient by doing so for future extreme weather events. Are those kinds of things part of the list or not right now?
So, Chair Farr, Commissioner Burney, I think there is some conversation about that. I think broadband is a great example of ensuring that this Blue River and the Valley has better internet connectivity than it had prior to the fire. I think there are additional conversations about other amenities that did exist before. So this idea of building it back better is something that I think are being embraced. I think specific community power conversations, I don't know if those are being incorporated. To some extent, we're seeing some of those features being incorporated into structures that are being rebuilt.
Yeah, I would say we don't have a line item in that $40 million for renewable generation, on-site renewable generation projects.
Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Commissioner Buck.
Thank you, Chair. I think it's really important that we remember whenever we have these big briefings is that the resources for wildfire recovery are really the McKenzie region's resources. I don't see them as ours as the county. It's that community's resources. Yet we are in a unique position where we're their first and only governmental organized structure that has the capacity in order to fight for those resources. And it right now, as we see it, and as we've analyzed it and shared with the rest of the board, the allocation that we're being offered through Oregon Housing Community Services is wholly inequitable. We are absolutely not getting what the people up the McKenzie deserve. And as their commissioner, I'm going to the mat every single time to fight for what I know they deserve. And this, as we document and as we write and as we brief the legislature each and every time, we're making a record of this, because this isn't the only time in the state's history that we're going to be going through this. We're really good at emergency initial response through OEM and, of course, our emergency management system. But by the mere fact that we are engaging 10 different state agencies, it's obvious that the state of Oregon doesn't know how to recover from these types of events. And in all reality, we're going to be going through this again one day in our future. And this is our learning curve, not only as a county, but also as a state on how to recover from massive major events. And of course, with the earthquake just a couple days ago, it seems, if a Cascadia occurs, this is, again, a model for how to recover from any event, natural or otherwise. I'm really proud of our board for going through this process, and we're lucky as a medium-sized county to have staff that really understand what we're fighting for and can go there. There are a lot of other communities that don't have our kinds of resources and are unable to document, and they're just thankful to get any meager amount of money through the state that they possibly can, even though they deserve more too. So it's our responsibility to continue to do that, not on just our behalf of the McKenzie region, but for all those other communities that will eventually face this again in the future. Mr. Chair.
Why don't you say what you really mean?
I don't mince words on this anymore. We're beyond that point.
Well, and I'll take my turn a little bit. A month ago, we sent a letter to OHCSA outlining concerns that we had regarding stipulations, regarding administrative overhead, regarding 4 different points that we made. And we got a letter back from the director, from Dr. Bell, that said, first off, I want to extend my appreciation to you and all those involved for taking time to provide written feedback. Enclosed is my response. I have that response right here pulled up, and I'm not really happy with the response that we got from Director Bell. In fact, it was just, we're doing what we do, and we'll do what we do. That's the way I interpret it. But she also said this, Mr. Adams, I'd welcome an opportunity for us to convene and talk through any of this if you'd like. This letter was dated September 13th. Have we had a chance to follow through on that? Is Director Bell going to be able to come down and actually listen as you look her in the eyes to the concerns that we have?
Chair Farr, thank you to Commissioner Buck, and we've had an ongoing conversation with her staff. Nearly weekly, we are in conversation with them and trying to work through some of the details. We have not extended an invitation to Director Bell. It's a fine idea to come address this board.
And it is her suggestion. Didn't come out of my brain or Commissioner Buck's brain or yours that, she said, I'd like to come down. I would welcome an opportunity. Quote, end quote. And she goes on a little bit more. She talks about, I'm not going to beat this to death because I'll get really tense if I start reading this out loud, the letter that I got back. In terms of additional requirements, I believe the draft document perhaps did not make as clear as it could have. But anyway, I'm not going to read it out loud because once again, it makes me sense. I believe you have a copy of the letter that Director Bell sent. Very courteous, and it followed on the heels of Director Bell coming down and helping us dedicate the Nell just 2 days prior to that. And we had a chance to meet Director Bell, and I have a great deal of respect and a great deal of hope for the work that she will do with the Oregon Housing Community Services. However, the response isn't as swift as the people we are serving need it to be. And you know that. I'm not telling you something you don't know. We have this letter, we have a response, and we have that I will welcome response from her. So hopefully we can do something with that. And I don't believe, HACS has got a lot of work to do. The Oregon Housing Community Service has a lot of work to do, a lot of unprecedented work that they've never had to do before. But that being said, this is their job. This is what they do. And keeping an eye on not the desks that it's laying on, but the people that we're serving. That really, I don't believe I need to educate you. That's a horrible thing to say. I don't need to, you're telling me how to serve people, in this particular instance. So Director Bell's given us an opportunity, I think, to open a door to get she and key staff down here in person to really answer the questions that we as a board have. So further comments on this, Commissioner Burney.
Well, I just want to agree with Chair Farr. I think that Commissioner Buck's words were pretty powerful. I'll use unpowerful words. There's a combination, I think, of institutional inertia and a lack of even knowing a structure to respond to these kinds of crises, which are only going to increase. So I think we ought to heartily embrace Director Bell's offer and have her at a Board of Commissioners meeting.
She views it as an opportunity, and it's our job to give her that opportunity. All right. Well, wonderful presentation. Anything further you'd like to add?
Not at this time.
All right. Good job. Good work. Vice Chair Trieger?
Thank you, Chair. Thank you. Just a process question. Do we need to give a assignment later to direct staff to invite Director Bell, or?
Do you need anything more formal than you have, Mr. Moker?
I don't think, I mean, it's not an ongoing work. It's simply an invitation. So we're hearing pretty unanimously that you'd like to invite Director Bell, and we can go ahead and do that and provide you an update on we can let the agenda team keep the agenda team posted on the status of that.
Right on. And the letter that I signed for the board was, Mr. Kyle helped draft that. And I know you, of course, your desks almost touched. So I know you work together. So that being said, I welcome that opportunity for Director Bell to see what we're doing down here. I think she's interested in that, and I know this for a fact. She wants to do a really good job, and it's part of our duty to help her know what a good job actually means in our county.
Correct.
All right. Then that being said, thank you, Mr. Adams. Thank you, Ms. Moker. Ms. McRae, thank you very much for the ongoing work. Thank you. It's not over. Right on. Then we'll move down the agenda. We have a really cool thing happening next, don't we? We do.
Mm-hmm.
Mr. Moker, the next item, I'm going to pull up the item number. It's boy, I've got too many pieces of paper shuffling around it. Item 9 is 9D. 9D. Mr. Moker,
yes,
I'm going to let you have the pleasure of introducing yourself.
Yes, thank you, Chair, and it is my pleasure to welcome Dina Dawson. Of course, Lauren Blythe, our interim operations director, is with us, but we wanted to have Dina here. Dina's been with us for about 3 months now, joined Lane County in July of this year as our new county clerk. Of course, the comments that you heard, and I'll address some of that, and I think Dina and her comments will address some of that too. But one, we wanted to have the opportunity to introduce Dina to the board and to those watching, and to provide an update on our elections process. So a little bit of background: Dina has over 16 years of experience in running elections in 3 different states, Oregon, Nevada, and Colorado. She most recently came to us from the city and county of Denver as the executive director for the elections in Denver. She also served as the elections administrator in Douglas County, Nevada, a community that I know something about. Unfortunately, we didn't have the opportunity to work together there as we crossed paths, or at times just crossed there. She also was the elections administrator in Adams County, Colorado, as well as in Archuleta County, Colorado. So over 16 years in 3 different states running elections, both urban and rural communities. She's a certified elections registration administrator and has a number of other elections certifications. I will tell you that Dina comes highly regarded from those who've worked with her. And my experience with her over the last several months has only added to what others have said about her previously, that she's someone who's coming with a great deal of professional knowledge and experience in elections, who's coming with open eyes towards our elections process, and already bringing some really great thoughts and ideas about how we can continue to evolve and innovate and improve our elections process here in Lane County. Just as a bit of a note to the public comment that we heard this morning, we take in Lane County generally, and I know Dina feels this way as well, we take our elections process and the accountability and integrity of the elections process in our community very seriously. So we have heard these comments and concerns that were raised. I will note that the public records requests that were submitted have been responded to. So there have been responses that have been provided there, but there have been some things raised and that we are taking seriously and looking at and having conversations about. We've had several conversations over the last several weeks. So just that for my part, I just wanted to have the opportunity on behalf of both Lauren and I, who were involved in bringing Ms. Dawson on board, to let you know how thrilled we are to have Dina in this really critical and important role at a really critical and important time in elections. in our community, across the state, and across the nation. And so without further ado, I'll turn it over to Dina just to tell you a little bit more about herself and walk through some of the things that she's been involved with in the short time she's been with us here in Lane County.
Thank
Welcome.
you. Thank you. Thank you, Commissioner Parr. Hello, commissioners. That was an incredible introduction. Thank you so much. I am so honored to be here. I am an election nerd, and among my colleagues who are also election nerds, we really care about the election process, and I'm thrilled to be here. It has been quite an interesting introduction. The very first week that I was here, we received the recall petition, and so I've already conducted one election. So that's pretty exciting since I've been here for 2.5 months. We're well into the production and creation of the upcoming November election. So I wanted to touch on a couple of just key dates and give some updates, and then happy to answer any questions. But as of today, we pulled our main voter file. And so basically we've pulled the list of voters, and we're providing it to our vendor this afternoon, who will be inserting ballots this week, and ballots will be going out in the mail stream a week from today on the 20th. So Thursday of next week, ballots will be hitting the mail stream. We've already sent approximately 2,000 ballots to our military and overseas voters. And we are dropping today about 1,200 absentee ballots for Lane County residents who are currently out of the state. So we're well into the process. We will be opening our drop boxes on the 20th, again, next Thursday. And the list of all of our drop boxes are available on our election website. Turnout for the last midterm election was 69%. And so we're hoping to get at least 70%. And if so, that would mean our team would be processing almost 192,000 ballots. And so I'm incredibly excited to also introduce some increased transparency through this process. We are looking forward to sharing the election process with those that are interested. And so there's opportunities for observation, so folks can come in and see what the election process looks like, the life of a ballot. We're happy to answer any of those questions, but just imagine 192,000 of those ballots gives a good opportunity for folks to come and observe. The deadline to register to vote is a week from today on the 18th. For any brand new voters, it's important to register to vote so you can receive that ballot. Folks that are updating or making changes to their registration, they still have an extended period of time to make those changes. It's just for brand new registrants. It's important to get registered before the 18th. The state voter pamphlet will be being mailed shortly, but the deadline for that is the 19th. So folks should be receiving the state voters pamphlet in their mailbox over the next week or so. We've already introduced on our website the results schedule. So we've anticipated every time that we are going to be counting ballots through the election process, we are going to post election results. So that's available on our website now, so folks know exactly when they can expect to see results. We're going to have about 110 election workers, and they will be brought in to securely collect ballots from drop boxes, conduct signature verification, and help us open and prepare ballots to be counted. Again, ballot box collections are going to begin on October 24th. And so ballot sorting and signature verification are going to take place shortly afterward. I'm working on with the team a schedule of our events. As I mentioned, we want to be as transparent as possible. So we want to share with the parties and candidates a list of when we're going to be doing these things so that folks know when to observe, when to come in to take a look at. Deconstruction is a term that we've used for many years in Colorado, and I coined the term in Nevada too, and I'm hoping that it sticks here. And that's just unfolding the ballots and preparing the ballots to be counted. And so we expect deconstruction to begin on November 1st. We will be counting ballots beginning on November 3rd. So that's a lot of dates and information, but we will be happy to share a schedule of our activities for folks to be able to come and observe. Observers do need to be authorized by a political party, a candidate, or by the county clerk. And anyone that's interested in observing should contact their party now, or a candidate there, or our office. We'll be happy to. It's a simple process. The party fills out a form and just authorizes you to observe. I have a meeting scheduled next week with both the local parties to introduce them to the election process, discuss any changes that we've made, and to be able to go through the whole observation process so that they're prepared to assign staff to come down and observe the process. Just something that's a little bit new in Oregon, and everyone probably is a little bit familiar with it now, is just that postmarked ballots will still be counted. And so I like to tell everyone it's important to drop your ballot at the drop box 7:59:59. 8 o'clock, if you're in line, you're able to drop that ballot. But in 16 years, I have cried many times when folks get there at 8:01 and they're not able to drop off the ballot and something has come up. And so vote early, but no later than 7:59:59. But if you're in line at a drop box, you're able to vote, or at our office to be able to return that ballot. But if your ballot is postmarked by Election Day, November 8th, and it's received by within 7 days afterwards, it will still be counted. So I just wanted to mention a couple of things that moving forward with the office, I'm really looking forward to working with those that have lost faith in the election process, to rebuild trust, because it's incredibly important. And I take it as a personal challenge. I want everyone to really trust the process, and I've been successful at doing that in other locations. So I'm really excited about that. I want our office to serve as the trusted source and to be able to successfully combat the mis, dis, and malinformation, also known as MDM, if you're hearing it out there. We want to be the trusted source. If people have questions and they're hearing misinformation or malinformation, come to us, come to our office. We'll walk you through the process and explain everything, and take your suggestions and see if there's anything that we can improve on. Additionally, once I get my feet under me and we're able to get through this election, I really want to work with marginalized voting groups to make voting more accessible. And I've got a lot of ideas from other locations that I've been at to be able to provide more access. And then finally, I borrowed this acronym from former Denver elections director, Amber McReynolds, who is basically an election celebrity, if you're not aware, but she used this acronym FASTER. And so I'm continually going to strive to find innovative solutions and provide for fair, accessible, secure, transparent, equitable, and reliable elections. And so the motto for my team, who have been incredibly gracious and have completely bought in to our approach of looking at every single process through the lens of equity, sustainability, and compliance with law, to make sure that every process that we have complies with this FASTER acronym, and that we're providing the best services for the voters and citizens of Lane County. So thank you so much for hearing me.
Well, thank you, Ms. Dawson, and thank you for joining us here. Fair, accessible, secure, transparent, equitable, and reliable.
Yes, sir.
FASTER. We're on it. Okay.
Thank you.
I write things down.
Me too.
And before others may have questions for you, I have a couple of real quick ones. One, you'll find this to be a tradition. On the day this year on November 9th, I usually show up over there with a big supply of voodoo donuts. Because people like voodoo donuts. That's just the brand. I get voodoo because it's between me here and your office, and I don't have to deviate from so you can look forward to that. The second one is kind of a serious question. You talk about both local parties. That doesn't cover everybody.
Agreed.
How do you cover those of us who are not a member of a party?
Well, specifically through ORS, or Oregon Revised Statutes, there are some opportunities that are extended to local parties. So that's where I'm starting. And so to be appointed as an observer, there are local parties can appoint or a candidate. So I'm starting with the local parties as required by law to make sure that I'm introducing that, but I plan to expand and make our office as accessible to all. So anyone that's interested in finding out more right now that isn't a member of a local party, contact me and I'll start working outward. Okay. It's a pretty good number of people that aren't, what are the two local parties we're talking about? We're talking about Pacific Green. No, we're talking about, Democrats and Republicans. You know, I served in the House of Representatives and we had one rep up there, Rep. Bob Jensen, who served as first as a Democrat, then as a non-affiliated, and then as a Republican. Was elected all three in his district to the House Rep. So I really urge that we find a way to reach out to the people who don't have that letter behind their name, because there are a lot of people that don't have that or have a different letter behind their name. Absolutely. I myself am not affiliated with a major party, and I haven't been for many years, but When it comes to the requirements for observation purposes and just getting straight for the preparation of election, that's where I'm starting, but absolutely.
The letter of the law. And if the letter of the law doesn't address the entire alphabet, then we need to work on the letter of the law.
Absolutely.
Right on. Commissioners, questions beyond welcome? Commissioner Buck.
It's welcome. Welcome to Lane County. We've already had a chance to talk on the phone regarding citizen initiatives, which has also been thrown your way in the last couple of months.
Yeah.
As you've arrived, there's a lot to do here. And I appreciate very much your willingness to come and serve Lane County. I know that we'll be served well.
Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner. Any further comments or questions? Commissioner Burney.
Nice to meet you. An election nerd at this point in American history is not as easy as I'm guessing it used to be. Especially if you heard some of the comments this morning, which I'm sure you did. I appreciate your willingness because it sounds like you're just passionately attached to free, fair, enlightened elections.
Yes, sir.
There are some that like to say that we have not been that way, or different entities have not been completely open and transparent. And I really salute and know, I can tell just by hearing you, that you're going to make sure that those that say that have an opportunity to be heard. They have an opportunity to watch. And if some choose to still make a lot of noise, well, that's the issue, because truly democracy does depend upon trust in the elections. So a hearty welcome. And I really appreciate your passion. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner. Vice Chair Trigger.
Thank you, Chair. Welcome. I'll just add my voice to the welcome. It's always good to see new women leaders at Lane County, and appreciate your work already. I will just, from my perspective, when you said an election nerd, I could tell you were, because my definition of a nerd of any topic is they really like not only for themselves to understand the what and the how, but the why, and then to share that back so other people can understand why. And I see that already when the election results posting, you don't just say at this time on this date, but you have a description of which ballots will be being reported at that time and why, how it relates to the other deadlines and so on. So that level of detail that really just helps people understand the why things are the way they are, instead of just here's what it is. I really appreciate that. Really look forward to more of that. And again, welcome and thank you.
Thank you.
Well, thank you. MLM. Say what MLM is again?
MDM. It's
MDM.
Miss, dis, and malinformation.
Miss, dis, malinformation.
I thought it was a drug. Thank you.
MDM. I thought it was a casino in Las Vegas.
It's really big in the election world. It has,
and I do understand that, and and I know that this, being an election node, that the people who are susceptible, who have listened to MDM. Thank you, MDM. Believe it to be the truth, and so with the respect of people thinking they're saying the truth, most of them believe it to be the truth. Some probably don't. Some are propagating malinformation themselves on purpose, but really people believe it to be the truth, so they deserve the respect, the full respect of thinking that it's the truth, and making certain that when you talk to me, when I tell you something that I think is true, that's not, that you have facts that it's not true, just make sure that I'm not being demeaned in the response. And make
absolutely.
Sure that, yeah, okay, I know that. I know that is the case. Perfect. Thank you very much. Anything further? Then we are really very, very pleased to have you here. And I'm going to say the words out loud. Cheryl Bechart, wow, what a superstar Cheryl has been for all of these years. And she welcomes people into elections before, during, and after to watch the process. I've seen the process, and I can speak to the process and the integrity of the process. The data is a question that people continue to raise, and I know we'll continue to address that. Yep. Thank you. Thank you, Ms. Mokrajski.
Thank you. And I don't have any additional announcements.
You have no announcements. Thank you, Mr. Blythe, by the way. I'm going to say thanks for being there. All right. And no administrative announcements. We have no reason for executive session this morning. We will talk about executive session this week later on in this day. Is there any other business before we go into recess? What the heck? Then at this point, we'll recess until 1:30, where we'll return in a regular session for a second reading and public hearing on ordinance PA 1386 at 1:30. Until 1:30, we are recessed.
Here's the whole farmers market across the street.